Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lords of Limited. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan Sachs. Ethan, it is Pro Tour weekend this weekend. I have watched some drafts. Have you been watching the Standard as well? Are you plugged in enough to the competitive scene that you've watched all 16 rounds of coverage?
I'm so glad you asked me, Ben, because I have in my hands right now, our YouTube viewers will see, a sleeved up copy of Blue Red Phoenix and Pioneer. I have 2 RCQs on the calendar
Ooh.
in the coming months. So I'm plugged in. I didn't really know much about Standard, but I did watch some. Did you the Orzhov Broncos deck is sweet. Did you see any of that?
I am not plugged into Standard.
Oh,
I watched Limited,
So
as always.
I just wanted to shout this out because I feel like you'll appreciate it. So it's playing the like Dark Confidant saddle card, like one of the black one.
Caustic Bronco?
Yes, Caustic
I'm
Bronco.
plugged in. I know the card names.
Thank you. Well, so it uses that plus the new like Vampiric Tutor card that has a spree where you can like search your library for a card, put it on top.
Insatiable Appetite.
So you search for a card, this 15 mana creature, and then saddle the Bronco and then reveal it and hit your opponent for 15.
That's cool.
So it's pretty sick. It's a pretty cool deck. Also just playing like good cards like Sheoldred, which also works with that Vampiric Tutor card because the other spree effect lets you target a player, draw 3 cards. Oop, that's 3 Sheoldred triggers, lose 6 life. So pretty sweet deck. And just like, I mean, I'm so excited. Jason Yee, who I got to test with, who's just like a limited all-star. They lost like 3 win-ins in their first Pro Tour in Chicago, and then just binked this one in the top 8.
Boom! You love to see it.
Yeah, it was a very exciting weekend. I enjoyed the coverage. I did not enjoy some of the camera work for the draft.
The
portion.
Day 1 draft was a little awkward angle.
I mean, Day 2 wasn't much better, but there was much less zooming. But like, I was getting motion sick watching Seth's draft. I was not happy.
You don't like watching things like this?
On the side, like, yeah, whatever. I was like, why can't that judge move? Get these people a GoPro on their body or something. And then also, like, how much work? I mean, it would be work, but like they do the draft in advance. There's like a 2-hour, 3-hour delay before coverage happens. Like, can we just get a digital overlay of the pack rather than having to watch a sideways view of someone riffling through the packs extremely quickly?
So you would want like a digital overview and then like almost like a Twitch webcam of the person with the pack down in the corner or something like that?
That's what I would like.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing you miss is like, it is like when you see them pull the cards to the front, you get a sense of like what they're picking between. So you might miss that.
The commentators should be able to set that up for you anyway, right?
I agree. So I have some notes. Because I want limited coverage to be good. I feel like back in like the heyday of, pre-COVID and certainly when like GPs were happening, I feel like there was a lot of scuttle on Twitter about like the limited portion being boring and like I'll tune in after the first 3 rounds and stuff. And I'm just like, I feel like we could make it interesting and engaging, but like, I don't know if camera zooms is the way to do it. Sorry,
So can we expect digital overlays at KubeCon when you're doing coverage there? Just a little 2-hour draft ahead of time. Ethan whips up a digital overlay and then you bing bang bong show magic what's up.
I have to be the change I want to see in the world. Just me personally. I don't know. We'll see. I'll chat. We're having a little production meeting tomorrow night, so I'll see if I can float that idea.
And for anybody that doesn't know, KubeCon, you're doing coverage.
Yeah, KubeCon in October, KubeCon 2024. Very, very excited. I mean, you can either watch the coverage from afar, or you can come attend in Madison. I'm excited to go. It's going to be really, really fun. Okay, so enough about the constructed portion and my rants about camera work. What were your thoughts about the limited portion of the Pro Tour?
I have some thoughts about Seth's Day 1 draft. I think some disagreements. Again, I'm not a world champion, not a Pro Tour champion, whatever. But I think I would have navigated that pretty significantly differently. And the second draft, I think, was really interesting. I'm excited to dive into them with you. I always enjoy Magic for Stakes. And I do think, we've talked about this format a little bit before starting the old recording button here, but I have cooled on the format a little bit, partially because I've played less Magic this week and I've hit a bad streak of variance, which I think you can be prone to do in this format. But also, things have started to feel a little bit samey to me. Like, I think it seems like the format is wide open and you can do all this different stuff, but I think a lot of stuff does fall into like the same 2, 3, 4 buckets after a while. But I think more than anything that sticks out to me about this format, I did enjoy watching the pros play it. And I think looking at some of the 3-0 deck lists, I think this format lends itself very much to being in a highly competitive draft environment. Like, I think it's way better there, certainly than it is on Arena Best of One. Like, I think I played Magic Online this week. I will keep playing Arena Best of One because it's the NBA Finals time and I like drafting on my phone while I watch the NBA games in the evening. But I think when I'm streaming, it's largely going to be on MTGO because I've really enjoyed playing best of 3, a little bit higher stakes, and weird stuff still happens in the drafts on MTGO. And I'm
Sure.
really looking forward to, I think, competing in the Arena Opens on this format. I think it'll be really cool.
Yeah, so Arena Open next weekend, which is sealed day 1, but then best of 3 draft day 2. 2 of those if you qualify, get your 3 wins or 4 wins in your first draft. And then the following weekend is Arena Championship qualifier, which is also limited, but it's sealed. And I'm just still not a huge fan of the sealed format, even though I will, like, I'm going to go to a sealed RCQ. I played in a sealed RCQ on Magic Online yesterday, went 2-2 drop. Those are tough. Those are like, whatever, 400 player fields. You basically have to go X and 1 or better in 10 rounds. So, you get your second loss. And you can obviously play for prizing beyond that if you want to, but I chose the life equity of just dipping. And you sort of just know, like, I was watching a streamer who was playing in that event, and their round 1 opponent had 4 mana Oko and Bonnie Paul. And I was like, well, I do not have those cards. Like,
Right.
And I know from my experience with playing Murders of Karlov Manor that the Magic Online event that I played in there, where I faced, one of the same 3 rares every single round. And you're just like, you're going to expect that raw power. You can also, not to say that you can't win with some scrappier sealed decks or some synergy or whatever, like some really good play, some deck swapping, all that stuff. Like, it's still skill intensive, but there is a sort of base level of like, it's gonna, like, you don't open good stuff like that, it is going to be hard to expect to top 8 an event like that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's get into the episode today. We're going to review the 2 drafts that were featured on day 1 and day 2 of the Pro Tour. We've got a JLK What's the Play. We've got some format check-in stuff, some cards to chat about, a lot of stuff. Before we get into that, first things first is the Patreon page. Patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show if they so choose. The show will always be free, but we have a lot of great perks over at the Patreon page. Base level that everybody gets access to is the Lords of Limited Discord. I shouted this out last week. I'm going to shout it out again. Next week is the Arena Open. Following week, Arena Championship. Those are events that people in our Discord are going to be participating in, and they're going to be able to, reap the rewards of that like-minded community in our Discord for those sealed pools. Hey, I'm going to fire this one last bullet, or I've only got 1 bullet to fire for day 1, or I'm doing the qualifier for the qualifier. Like, how should I build this? Like, all that stuff. That community is great for. A lot of great perks as you move up the reward tier rankings, access to our show notes, access to the show a day early, ad-free, and even access to monthly coaching sessions with me or Ben. So if any or all of that sounds of interest to you, head on over to the Patreon page. And we want to shout out our new patrons the first week that they join. So this week we are welcoming Merrick, MQ, Ryan, Joseph, Shane, Mad Jack, Elias, Gabe, Marco, Hart, and Nicholas. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, truly cannot say thank you enough.
All right, let's get into a JLK What's the Play, actually not from JLK himself. This comes from David, who says, I'm one of your Shanghai listeners and just wanted to reach out firstly to say how much I enjoy listening to your show each week and how indebted I am to you both for helping me to become a more well-rounded, limited player. My deck was a very mediocre blue-white deck splashing Bruce Tarl, my sole bomb, and I was on the draw and very much scrambling. You love to see it. My opponent had an Outcaster Greenblade in play. That's the 1/2 that grabs a land or a desert, which was already a 3/4 set to become a 4/5 next turn. I had 2 islands in play and was on 18 life. I missed my land drop and thus needed to play Silver Deputy to put a land on top of my deck to have a play next turn. My hand aside from the Deputy was as follows. Trained Errinx, the 1 white 3/1. Lassoed by the Law, 3 and a white enchantment removal spell that makes a mercenary. Jailbreak Scheme, a card that keeps kind of moving. Like, you get it late, but a card that's, like, I think kind of good. That's the blue spree. You can either pay 2 additional to put a creature artifact or creature on top or bottom of their owner's library, or you can pay 3 additional to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and it's unblockable until end of turn. This town ain't big enough. That's the double bounce spell that costs 3 less if you're targeting one of your own creatures. Prosperity Tycoon, 3 and a white, 4/2, brings along a mercenary, and the aforementioned Bomb in Bruce Tarl, the 2 white-red, 4/3, makes oxes, all that good stuff. The question is, all that information, you're super behind, hand stacked of plays, behind on lands. The question is, which land do I go get? Viable options are plains, red-white desert, mountain. What are your thoughts here, Ben? Before you get into the answer, like, what are you thinking about in terms of how do you not lose this game?
Well, I think set up the situation very well because you're behind. And I think the more behind you are, I think the riskier plays you probably need to make to get back in the game. So I do like the thought process here and the setting of the stage. So really your choices are, I mean, if you've got to me, it's plains versus red, white, desert, right? Because plains, putting
Right.
that on top would allow you to play trained Erranks and get on board.
Or you could cast Jailbreak Scheme.
Or you could cast
as
Jailbreak
well.
Scheme to reset the Outcaster Greenblade, yeah.
Mhm.
So I think armed with all of that knowledge, I think my inclination is that I just need to start doing things. And I think
Yes.
I would go get a white, an untapped white. I think I would go get untapped white so that I had the option of Trained Erranks or Jailbreak Scheme. And then any land sets you up for Lassoed by the Law, which can then answer whatever your opponent's biggest threat at the time is, while also giving you a chump blocker, which is going to, I think, hopefully buy you enough time to stabilize and get back in the game. So my plan would be get planes, probably Trained Erranks, maybe Jailbreak Scheme to reset Greenblade, although I think that's a bit of a last-ditch effort.
Yeah, I would less want to reset Greenblade and more so think about just targeting whatever their next play is on the following turn.
But I think more than anything, you've already signed up for basically no plays, and I think you have to just start casting cards.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I feel too. So David's answer was, in the end, I chose Red White Desert on the grounds that I felt I was very behind and that Bruce Tarl was the only play that could realistically stabilize me, even if it meant taking more damage in the short term. So the issue I have with that, and it sounds like you and I are on the same page here, is that you're then effectively signing up to do nothing next turn. I mean, you actually do have a secret play, which is to cast This Town Ain't Big Enough on your opponent's whatever, either Green Blade or whatever their next play is, and your Silver Deputy. So you can cast that for the 2 blue mana you have available and then play your tapped desert that turn. I just don't like that. I hear what you're saying. Like, you're like, and I hear what David's saying about, like, the more behind you are, the riskier plays. This just feels too risky because you're not guaranteed to hit an untapped white or red source the turn after. Like, if you were, then I could see being like, well, I'm going to take next turn off, but then I know I get to play Bruce Tarl the following turn. But you don't even know that. And so I think I agree with you. I would just get a plains here, know that I can play either Erranks or Scheme the following turn, and know that any untapped land after that will unlock the rest of my hand, save for Bruce Tarl. And you have some pretty good plays like Prosperity Tycoon, 2 bodies, Lassoed by the Law, removal spell, plus a chump blocker body. Like, I don't think you only have Bruce Tarl as your way to get back in this game.
Yeah, I forgot This Town Ain't Big Enough could be played for 2. I kind of like going and getting Red White Desert.
I talked you into it, huh?
You talked me into it, but I think what I was going to say earlier when I started my little spiel was that I disagree with the sentiment that Bruce Tarl was the only play that could realistically stabilize me. Like, when I'm behind here, I want to play removal. When I'm really behind and trying, yes, like, so I think no matter what, probably, even if I had Bruce Tarl mana available, I would probably be planning to cast Lassoed by the Law to catch back up, because when you try to play a creature to stabilize and your opponent has a removal spell, that's when they get to just slam the door on you, no matter what.
And you're not guaranteed to get a 2/2, right? It's like, I forget what Bruce's clause is, if it's revealing a land or a non-land gets you the Ox, but you're not even guaranteed to have 2 bodies. So you're right. Like, if it's the card advantage half of it and then they answer Bruce, like, you're just done.
Right. So and they've already set up that Outcaster Greenblade was set to become larger than Bruce Tarl, like, was set to become a 4/5. So I don't love that situation there. So I think that is the statement that I take umbrage with the most. Now that I had kind of put together, thanks to your excellent guidance here that this town ain't big enough. Can you
Reading the
cast the 2
cards,
mana?
explain the cards. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I don't have them in front of me here. I'm a very visual learner, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I like getting Red White Desert, planning to cast this town ain't big enough, and then any fourth land you can then lassoed by the law, and then you also give yourself a better chance to cast Bruce Tarl down the road. I think I like getting Red White Desert.
Okay, we're back. He's back on Red White Desert because you can cast this town ain't big enough. Very interesting spot for sure. I've had I will say this about the format, and maybe it's just about Magic in general, but I think like a lot of these sequencing decisions, this was sort of part of Josh's question last week of sequencing lands. When that's part of the equation, it's part of the draft equation, it's part of your deck building equation, it's part of your gameplay equation. It really adds a layer of skill, I think, to the format, which I do appreciate.
For sure.
I do want to touch on just a few cards before we dive into the draft review. A couple cards that I have really liked. I know I've talked about Steer Clear in the past. Talked about it with my little Bant mount deck that I've been drafting a bit of. So Steer Clear is a single white instant, deals 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature, 4 damage instead if you owned a mount as you cast the spell. So you can't get blown out. My opponent thought that they could kill my thing in response. Doesn't matter. Sorry. Checks on just when it's cast, not on resolution. But I do think Steer Clear is like a part of the format that I feel like there's the level 1 stuff we talked about. And I feel like Steer Clear is obviously it's just good in, if you're green, white mounts or whatever. But I think as a framing for, either being white, blue, splashing some green for some mounts, some Naya stuff, like Steer Clear is a card you can get late, even in MTGO drafts. So I think this is just sort of it's not just like I'm exploiting whatever kind of, drafters I think I'm playing against. I think just good players are not taking this card highly, and not that they should, but I think it's a card that I'm clocking in packs that other people aren't. I'm like, I can take this Congregation Gryff here, and there's a Steer Clear in the pack, and I'm hoping that wheels. And when you can, in the era of play boosters, when you can grab a card on the wheel that's actually good, like a good cheap removal spell for your deck, I think that's really powerful. The flip side is you can end up taking them and then you just don't quite get there on number of mounts. I'm not interested in playing this when I don't think I can at least some of the time have this deal 4 damage.
Yeah, that's fair. But I've liked Steer Clear. Just 1 mana way to interact is definitely powerful.
Mm-hmm. The other card that it took me kind of a while to get on board with was Highway Robbery. This is the 1 in a red.
So good.
It's so good. Well, I don't want to use the D word, but the game in hand win rate, the data is not kind to this card. It has a pretty low game in hand win rate, which I'm kind of surprised by because I think it's cheap card flow, etc. But so this is 1 in a red. You can discard a card or sack a land. If you do, you draw 2 cards and it's plot for 1 in a red. And this card is just extremely powerful, I think, because one of the things that you don't love doing on turn 2 is casting Tormenting Voice. But plotting Tormenting Voice is actually pretty nuts because you get to spend your mana, but you're because a lot of the times the reason you don't want to cast that is you don't really know what you're not going to need, right? Maybe your hand is just all I actually want all of this stuff. I just don't actually have something else to do for 2 mana. And so Highway Robbery lets you say, okay, I'm just going to bank that. And then down the road, I can sack a land, I can do something, but then it's free. And then you're just getting a whole new world of options in your hand to do that you didn't have to spend the 2 mana on. Another card you can get pretty late, but I've been really happy with, sometimes multiple copies of Highway Robbery in certain decks.
Well, and it easily sets up double spell for a card that you don't have to pick highly if you care about that sort of life. And the fact that it's never dead, the fact that you can sack a land late in the game, even if you have no cards in hand, so good. It's the best version of Tormenting Voice, bar none.
Yeah. It's very, very good.
Takes us on to Harrier Strix. This is blue for the 1/1 ETBs. Tap a permanent and opponent controls, and then you can pay 2 and a blue, I think, to loot. Nobody cares about that ability. It's just single blue 1/1 flyer, tap an opponent's permanent, I think. So basically, single blue flyer, commit a crime. I have played against this card a couple times on MTGO and been very impressed by what my opponents were doing with it. And I think on Arena, you probably don't have to dip down to the Harrier Strix level. You certainly could, but I think its best home is Grixis Crimes, where you have at knife point, and it gives you then a single mana way to commit a crime while making mercenary tokens, and also plays crazy well with the mercenary tokens, because then it's a real threat too. Like if you've gotten your at knife point going and then you've got 3 mercenary tokens on the board, all of a sudden this is clocking you as a 4 powered flyer, and your opponent has to deal with it. It committed a crime very cheaply. I think Harrier Strix has got a home in the format, which I did not think.
There's a lot of cards on this list that I have either seen Andrew Cuneo cast against me and losing to him twice on Moto, and he is playing this format a lot and winning in this format a lot. He's at the top of the trophy leaderboard on Magic Online for this format. I've been watching some of his YouTube VODs as well for drafting this set. He really is enjoying it, but he has played Harrier Strix a bit, and he's been messing around in Dimir and Grixis Crimes, and he's definitely cast his fair share of intimidation campaigns and made that card look good. And Harrier Strix is a nice little cheap piece of that puzzle. Again, sort of falls in the realm of both of these cards we've talked about already, Steer Clear and Highway Robbery, that you can get it late. Like when you can get this card that is actually synergistic and slots into your deck, when you get that 10th, 11th, 12th pick, that's pretty powerful.
And so important to have cards that belong in the right slots in your deck in this format too. I think certainly one of the ways you can win is not meeting the barrier to entry of power level for the format. But I think an even more subtle, trickier way to just lose without realizing why you're losing in the format is to just have 2 to 3 cards that just don't slot in right to your deck, because it's so disastrous when you draw them.
Yeah, no, totally.
Next up, we've got Holy Cow, 2 and a white for a 2/2 flash flyer. ETB, you can scry and gain a life. This card has been very impressive to me in red-white, and just flyers in general in red-white. The cheap flyers combined with mercenary tokens is, I think, really where it's at for aggro beatdown in this format, because green stalls up the ground so well. But I have had problems against flyers from red-white decks, and when I have started prioritizing flyers a little bit more in my aggressive white decks, I think it has gone much better for me.
Do you think that's because one of the things I was noticing, it's interesting, both of the featured drafters, spoiler, you can fast forward 10 seconds to miss the spoiler if you didn't watch the drafts. Both of the featured drafters ended up in not derpy, but aggro decks. I mean, Seth's deck was a derpy aggro deck, but part of a lot of the games that I watched them play was they got their opponent to 18 life and then they stabilize. Right? And then their opponent just was doing bigger and better stuff. And I have found red white, with what you're talking about, flyers combined with mercenaries to pump them, is kind of the only real derpy aggro deck. I've not been super impressed. We chatted about it last week, red black, kind of crimes, kind of outlaws, aggro. And that's where we maybe have to sort of clarify some stuff that we got pushback in the Discord about our dislike of at knife point. Well, dislike of at knife point in a red black aggro deck because it's a 3-mana 0/0, but in a Grixis Crimes deck, it is that kind of little bit of incremental engine-y card that you can get value out of, and that can be worthwhile. But I have been impressed as well with Holy Cow and some mercenary tokens. Also, Holy Cow is a great 3-drop to get back with your 5-mana 4/3 flyer Gravedigger.
Well, and even the 4 and a white, is it called Sterling Supplier or something like that? The 3/4 flyer that puts a +1/+1 counter on ETB. That's been good enough. Just as something that can fly over all of the green ground creatures that are mucking things up.
Well, speaking of green ground creatures, how are you feeling about Patient Naturalist these days? 2 and a green, 2/3, ETB, mill 3, and you can pick a land from among them, put it into your hand. If there isn't a land, you get to make a treasure instead.
I think this card is my Achilles heel in the format. I really like Patient Naturalist, but I don't actually think it's that good in the format, which leads to me picking it a lot incorrectly.
It's the whole, it goes back to last week's tweet, right? It's the long line of 3-mana creature that also gives you a value thing, like a 2-for-1, whatever. 2-for-1s are out, baby. 3-for-1s are the new 2-for-1.
I'm washed because I like Patient Naturalist. Feels bad, man.
Sorry.
It's hard for me to not like that card. I also really like Rise of the Varmints, and so I take Patient Naturalist. I'm great, I can get Rise of the Varmints and go 3/3 again on Festival Arena. I don't know. But I think I am too high on Patient Naturalist. I think it is good to playable in the green-black deck, and you probably don't really care about it that much in any of the other green decks, which is sad. And
Yeah,
I
right.
think
Like,
part of why I have like come down on the format a little bit this week, because I want to play in a format where Patient Naturalist is good, not where Giant Beaver is good. Like I just I,
wow, the beaver
so I like
shade.
the format doesn't line up with my natural inclinations, tendencies quite as
Yeah.
much. But again, do still think it's a very good format. I'm still enjoying drafting and all of that. But I think I got to move Patient Naturalist down in my pick order, and it's very hard for me to do that.
Yeah, I was telling you before we recorded that like I feel like I've been talking a big game about Patient Naturalist on the show, and then every time I see it in a pack, I'm like, I don't really want to take that because you're right. Like in one, I just know that I can get 3 mana 2-for-1 creatures no matter where I end up, so I don't need to prioritize it highly. But I also just like I don't want it in like I just want Drover Grizzly, the 4/2, over this like every time in my 3-drop slot in every green deck that isn't green black, I guess.
You don't care about it in green blue that much,
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
but
So I guess just in green red, green white, but yeah.
I think this also ties hand in hand. Last week I was talking about, well, I don't know about Spinewood's Paladin, I don't know about Cactarantula. Like I'm on board with those cards now. I kind of understand. I see the light for green, just mucking up the ground and being a
Yeah.
mid-range deck that just whatever. And Spinewood's Paladin, Cactarantula, both very good at that. But I think I got to move Patient Naturalist down in my pick order.
Yeah. Well, speaking of 2-for-1s are out, 3-for-1s are in. Plan the Heist is the other card we want to talk about. That's the 2 blue, draw 3. It has plot for 3 and a blue. Actually, it's surveil 3 if you have 0 cards in hand, and then draw 3. Plan the Heist is really good. This is another Cuneo card. He's very high on this, and I think rightfully so. I think this card is strong. Like, this is one of the people kept asking me, like, what does blue add? You keep talking about this like Bant Mounts deck. What is blue adding? And I say 3-for-1s. It's adding Plan the Heist and it's adding Make Your Own Luck, which are huge for that deck to get ahead in a big way.
Right, and to not run out of steam. Yeah, Make Your Own Luck. Holy cow, what a card.
Yeah. Though I mean, it's because I'm a big 18 land boy a lot of the time, but I have drawn 3 lands off of Make Your Own
Oh,
Luck multiple
my Make Your Own
times.
Lucks have been terrible, and I still think it's a great card. I have been making my
Yeah.
own bad luck, as is on brand for me. But my
It's on
opponents
brand.
continue to, like, Make Your Own Luck, plot fractured identity, draw more gas. It's just been, oh man, I've gotten owned savagely by that card. But yeah, it is excellent.
Yeah.
As is Plan the Heist. And lastly, we've got Mobile Homestead here, which is a 2-mana 3/3 vehicle, crew cost of 2, and whenever it attacks, you can look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you can put it onto the battlefield tapped.
Yeah, it's a Smuggler's Copter.
Smuggler's Copter. Woo! The takes.
No. But another card that I have seen Cuneo talk up on his YouTube VODs and sort of gave me pause because I think this looked kind of clunky, right? We've seen random 3/3 vehicles for 2 mana before that haven't been good. We've seen Raiders Carve, which was this as a 3 mana 4/3 vehicle, but it did the sort of same thing. And those cards were not very, very good. But I think Mobile Homestead kind of does it. It popped off for Javier Dominguez yesterday on his feature match. He just ripped land off of it 2 times in a row, which is pretty sick. So I don't know, like it's hard because like it's not entirely synergistic. Obviously, I do think it has a great home in mounts because it has haste there as well, little minor synergy. But I think any deck where you can like crew this reliably, like if you've got a high enough creature count, I think this card is. I just want to use the G word. I just want to say it's good.
Wow, the G word. So I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
Lots of these cards that you're saying Andrew Cuneo is high on, I added to this list to discuss, independent of watching Andrew Cuneo's VODs. Is it time to break our hashtag no more guests rule?
Bring him back on?
Bring him back on. He could be repeat guest number 2.
I'm in for that. We can reach out to Cuneo. I think he probably has some really great insights on the format. Like he's been cooking.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. I mean, like I just want to talk about Steer Clear and Highway Robbery, but a lot of these cards I co-sign for sure. Like Harrier Strix, but it's weird. Like stuff like Harrier Strix, and for a while it was Highway Robbery too. I mean, we're just still so early in the format, but these cards were cards that I just hadn't cast. I was like, they kept being cast against me, and then I was on that learning curve of like, all right, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. And then like start to see it late and like, okay, what is the situation where this card is good? And how is it being used effectively against me? And what cards are surrounding it type of thing. And it's a fun puzzle to solve. It's sort of like why the PT is it just feels a little early, right? It's like
Yeah,
we're
it's been a lot of the Twitter discourse.
a week and a half for them to try and like break open standard, and some people definitely stewed and brewed, but most people just seem to stick to what they knew and play Esper mid range, which is very popular and very good in the format. But like, and I can't imagine I would just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna focus on limited because like I can't focus on both of these things in whatever 10 days.
Sure, yeah, tough.
All right, well, speaking of, let's get to Seth Manfield's day one draft. He is the reigning PT champ from Chicago. And so we're going to sit down and see what he has to offer for the limited portion. What's going on in his draft?
So pack one, pick one. You see your rare is Stingerback Terror. That's the 2 red for a 7/7 flying trample dragon that gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand, and it's got plot for 2 and a red. That versus Mystical Tether, which is 2 and a white for an aura that exiles a creature an opponent controls when it ETBs until Mystical Tether leaves the battlefield. I think everyone is slamming Stingerback Terror there.
Yeah, it's splashable with the plot cost. Do you think I feel like what's the scuttle about color rankings these days? I feel like red's bottom of the barrel. People are saying it's an Abzan life, and then red and blue are sort of left to the wayside. And I know Izzet is having some struggles in sort of the win percentage department, courtesy of 17 lands, but I still like red. I'm happy to draft red.
I think the thing that's tough about red, that's the thing. I also am happy to draft red. Like, I'm fine to draft red white. Like, red white and red black a little less so, but I like red
Yeah,
blue, partially just
I
because
do
I like
too.
playing the play style of red blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then red green, I guess 3 of red's decks are kind of mopey ground decks, which is where you can get yourself in trouble easily.
Yes. Yeah,
Like, if
and
you
lend
don't
themselves
build
to
those.
and they lend themselves to being like kind of small ball. Like you really have to make sure you're building those decks to go fast and under your opponents because they can just go so much bigger than you so quickly.
So maybe it's easy if you draft red to fall into the trap of drafting a bad red deck that can then lose if you're not like minding your P's and Q's the entire draft.
Right. Yeah, if you're snapping up irascible Wolverines and prickly pears like Ethan was last week and being
Yeah,
like,
but
I did it.
I do not mind drafting red. Probably maybe incorrectly. I mean,
Yeah.
I think my color power rankings would still have white at the end. I still think I have the same color power rankings for me as last week, but I think common wisdom is green 1, black 2, white
White
3,
3,
gap,
red. Yeah.
red,
Red,
blue,
then
and
blue.
pulling up the
Yeah.
rear. I think by blue pulling up ahead of red. I think red's in last in common wisdom. No?
Interesting. I thought it was blue, but I could be. I've lost touch. I'm out. I'm washed, Ben. We're washed. But we agree with Seth here on the Stingerback Terror. Pack one, pick one. I think everybody would slam that over Mystical Tether being the other option. Pick two is interesting, to say the least.
Yes. So have choices of Trained Airings, which is the 1 on a white 3/1, Patient Naturalist, 2 green for the 2/3, get a land, Omenport Vigilante, the 1 on a white 2/2 that has double strike as long as you've committed a crime, and Explosive Derailment, 2 and a red for the deal 4 at instant speed that can also have a chance to blow up an artifact.
I mean, I thought this was a clear explosive derailment when I was watching this live. When I was after I was getting over my motion sickness from the camera zooming, then I was like, I think this is a clear explosive derailment. Just like, even if you don't think derailment is the best card among these, which I'm not sure like, I guess you could make a case for one of the white 2-drops being better, like just on, they're both good and they do a thing and they're synergistic or whatever. And derailment is kind of medium as a 4-mana removal spell that doesn't kill everything, but like, you give weight to the red card after you have Stingerback Terror, right?
That's what I think. Like, I think it's close between Derailment and Trained Airings, and you can certainly make a case. Like, let's say you like beating down, you like white, you want to try to get into green-white mounts, which you think is the best deck. Like, I understand all of those things, and Trained Airings is the best aggressive creature in the format. Like, if you want to maybe be white, want to maybe beat down, but it's close. And I
Like
think
if it's pick one, it's close, and you can just sort of do whatever you feel
yeah,
like in that
sure,
moment.
absolutely. I would not question taking Trained Airings pack one, pick one here at all. I
Correct.
would not bat an eye. Like, great white 2-drop. You want to try to get into green white mounts, get it. Like, I think I might even make that pick at this
Yeah,
point in the
I
format.
think
Like,
so. I
pack one,
think I
pick
would
one for
too.
myself. but I think I want to play Stingerback Terror. Like, I'm going to fight to put Stingerback Terror is incredible. And
Yeah,
I think you have a chance to stay red here, stay monocolored. I would 100% take Explosive Derailment here.
I agree. Seth did not. This is why we're belaboring this pick so much. Is Seth took Trained Airings, which I found extremely confusing. He is obviously a better Magic player than I am, but I'll still say I find this extremely confusing. It leads him to a more confusing pick 3 as well. Like he could have taken a different lane here. So what happens pick 3?
So pick 3, your options are Resilient Roadrunner. That's the one in a red 2-drop that you can pay 3 to have it not be able to blocked by creatures with haste. And then Prairie Dog, 1 and a white for the 2/2 that gets a +1/+1 counter. If you didn't cast a spell during your turn, you can pay 3 white to give things double counters. If anything, would be getting a counter placed on it at the end of the turn. And there's also Collective Defiance, which is 1 red for a rare, one of the breaking news cards. And you can escalate it, so you can choose to deal 4 damage to a creature, pay an additional 1 to deal 3 damage to an opponent, or pay another additional 1 to have target player shuffle their hand like any number of cards and then draw that many cards.
Yeah. I mean, you could just have gone Terror, Derailment, Defiance. And again, like, do I think, like, if this were pack 1, pick 1, I love taking Prairie Dog. I do think Prairie Dog is the best card among these if it's pack 1, pick 1. And this is the card that Seth selects. And it makes a little more sense having the Trained Airings. But how much better of a start do you feel? Like, yeah, you've taken some slight hits in power level, but you're guaranteeing you're going to play Stingerback Terror. And then you have Removal Spell. And like Collective Defiance is a good card. It's a powerful card.
Yeah, and I think I was watching coverage on Twitch, and I think LSV said he would have gone Stingerback Terror, Derailment, Roadrunner. I think that's also a fine option as well. Like,
Sure.
I think it is not crazy to take Roadrunner over Defiance. I think personally I would be on Defiance just because I've valued removal so highly, and I think red does play a supporting color in the removal department very well to a lot of other
Mm-hmm.
colors. And I'm less jazzed about playing like a red attacking on the ground style strategy, which I think
Mm-hmm.
Roadrunner sets you up to do. So I think no matter what you choose between those two red cards, I think it's hard to make a case for red card, white card being a better start than red card, removal spell, or red card, removal spell, good threat that are all on one color. Because you just give yourself so much more power and flexibility in the draft in a draft pot at the PT where that's really valuable.
It's so valuable. And in a format like this, where the power level is so high, like what a dream to be able to get out of pack 1 and be like, whatever I open, I get to play because I haven't selected a second color. But because of this start, and then he basically ends up mono red the rest of the way, picking up a bit of blue at the end. So maybe could have he get an ionize. That's the 1 blue red counter spell. He gets that 10th pick. He gets a razzle dazzler last pick. So he could think about that. But if he's just mono red as he is the rest of the way, right? Grabs a cunning coyote 4th, grabs a discerning peddler 5th, a quilled charger 6th. Then really a dream here. Gets 7th pick, Hellspur Brute, which is the affinity for outlaws, 5/4 trampler. Like getting that so late after this kind of start, like I would already be like, man, I wish I'd just taken 2 other red cards.
Yes, which I think it was correct to do. It's just tough to defend moving into white there in a format like this. And then that leads ultimately to, if you take red cards, pick 2 and pick 3 in pack 1, you, as you said, are mono red coming out of pack 1. So then in pack 2, you see the following cards as your opens. There's an Explosive Derailment, sure, great card for your red deck. But there's also Bristly Bill Spine Sower, one of the better rares in the set. This is 1 and a green for a mythic 2/2 landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And you can pay 3 GG, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So that all of a sudden frees you up to then take Bristly Bill, maybe move into green, which was cut from your right, maybe reap the rewards in pack 2, and then draft red again in pack 3. But imagine opening anything here. And I mean, Bristly Bill is not close to the best open you could have if you're
No,
mono red. But the fact that you can take anything just is tough to me to commit to a second color for cards of the power level of Trained Airings and Prairie Dog when you had
right.
options to stay one color. I think moving into a second color, I would hope for it to be either something much more obvious or something much more powerful for me in this format.
Now, this card being green specifically, does that give you pause at all? Like, green was not particularly open at all in pack 1 for Seth. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows it's the best color. It's probably going to be highly contested. Like, do you think at all still, even with like, I mean, obviously if you're mono red, you take Bristly Bill, but that's not the world we're living in. Seth did take the 2 white cards. Do you think there's any defense to taking Explosive Derailment here just because you're like, what's the likelihood I'm actually going to be able to fight for green to be my second color?
Oh, I like giving Seth's picks, taking Explosive Derailment here, which is what he did.
Yeah.
But I think that's
Which is
the cost you pay by taking those 2 white cards, is you have to take Explosive Derailment here.
right. And if he had taken Bristly Bill, the option that he does pass up on is he could have gone red, green, splash white, because he gets a Congregation Griff pick 2, and then there's a Buried in the Garden pick 5 that he could have ended up on. It's obviously hindsight, whatever, like looking down and being results oriented, all that stuff. But like, it just really shows the ripple effects of those first 3 picks of like sort of what a stranglehold is on his draft here, where he has to take Derailment and then he takes Gila Courser next and messes around with thinking about blue for a bit with Lone Shark pick 3. He ends up deciding on red white, but it's like a good red white deck in a format in 2016.
Yes.
You know, like it's just not that good in Outlaws with Thunder Junction in the year of our Lord 2024.
Peddlers, the one in a red 2/2 that rummages. That card is a little bit of a yikes in this format.
I agree. I was trying to think, like, because one of my takeaways for PT testing, and I haven't done in pod drafts, like I haven't done any of the single limb pod drafts on MTGO yet. But one of my big takeaways was like 2 drops are premium and removal is premium because everybody knows they're good and you can easily end up without them. And Seth has 2 drops in droves. And I wonder if that was part of the calculation for taking those peddlers. I don't even know if he took them like that highly, but
he didn't. No.
But he took them and played them. And yeah, they're kind of mopey. I mean, yeah, they're making your Affinity for Outlaws creature cheaper, but it's about it.
So I think more than anything, what those picks 2 and picks 3 moving into white there shows is just how important flexibility is, given the option that you have to stay flexible. Like, you don't want to give up too much to stay flexible, but Seth didn't have to do that. Seth had the choice of stay flexible or just not stay flexible for cards that are about the same quality, and he chose the not stay flexible route, which I think was a mistake. Now, if you're giving up a bigger gap in power level, let's say it's like Trained Erranks versus the aforementioned Peddler, Trained Erranks versus Discerning Peddler, then I'm taking Trained Erranks, pack 1, pick 2. You know what I mean? But the fact that there's an Explosive Derailment there, I just think you got to take Derailment.
Yeah, I agree. Seth does end up in a red-white deck. You can watch some of his matches on coverage. He started off the day 0-2 and then just in absolute baller fashion rattled off 6 wins for the rest of the day. He ended day 1 at 6-2 after 1-2ing his draft. And I think it was a rough draft for sure. Like, and it's not like, you know, I don't know. It's like not like he would have ended up with an incredible deck. Like, I just think the good cards are getting snapped up, etc. But I think being able to play Bristly Bill, like, it just all of a sudden is the best card in your deck, right? Like, it's better than the Stingerback Terror, which is a very good card. And you just give yourself that option to open and play that.
And you're packing more interaction. You're packing an Explosive Derailment and a Collective Defiance, potentially, in a format where it's really important to be able to interact with your opponent's stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. All right, that takes us on to the day 2 draft. This is Yoshihiko Ikawa, who was the lone 8-0 player at the end of day 1. He sits down and sees a pack with the following cards as options: a couple white commons, Mystical Tether, the enchantment removal spell, and Take Up the Shield, 1 and a white. Instant, creature gets +1/+1 counter, indestructible, and lifelink until end of turn. Uncommons, Buried in the Garden, the enchantment for 2 green white. Enchanted land taps for an additional mana of any color, and when it Buried in the Garden enters the battlefield, you exile a non-land permanent an opponent controls. I was playing this. I had my Anaya deck in the sealed RCQ I was playing online yesterday, and my opponent played Boombox, which can blow up a creature, an artifact, and a land. Blows up land. So I was like, well, I can't play this card against you. That's terrible. So yeah, Buried in the Garden really got by by Boombox. There's a Gila Courser, our preview card, 2 in a red, 4/2, saddle 1. If it attacks when saddled, you exile the top card of your library. You can play it until the end of your next turn. And the rare in the pack is Free Strider Lookout, 2 in a green for a 3/3 with reach. And it says, whenever you commit a crime, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. This ability triggers only once each turn. Is this a slam dunk?
I mean, it's not a slam dunk, but I think it is a clear Free Strider Lookout. I mean, I'm not excited, so I'm not slamming it, but I think I'm taking Free Strider Lookout. I mean, you could maybe make a case for Mystical Tether if you like white and you want to value removal. I mean, this gives you a chance to try to get into the best color as green, and I think at the PT, why not me?
Yeah, why not you? Exactly. I love that. So Yoshihiko agrees, takes the Free Strider Lookout. Pick 2. There is a Voracious Varmint, 1 in a green, 2/2 Vigi. Pay 1, sack it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Explosive Derailment as well. Looking at the uncommons, there's a Scorching Shot, red, sorcery, deal 5 to a creature, and form a posse, red, white, X, make X 1/1 mercenary tokens.
Yeah, this is, I think, a more interesting pick. I think I would quickly narrow it down to Scorching Shot, Explosive Derailment, form a posse, and I think
Voracious Varmint is like the only green card in the pack, but you're not gonna, like, this isn't the case of Seth's pick 2 where you're like, well, I'm gonna make a concession to get deeper into green. It's like, no, just Voracious Varmint is too low on the power ranking scale that you're just gonna take what you think is the best card here.
Right. So, and I think Form of Posse I do like in the green multicolored decks as a late game top end mana sink, but I think not picking it quite this highly. So I think between Scorching Shot and Derailment, I think I would actually land on Derailment with the Free Strider Lookout here as only a single red pip, splashable in a multicolor green deck, instant speed. I just think it's a much more flexible pick for something that's close in power level to Scorching Shot. I mean, Scorching Shot is better if you're heavy red, but there's a lot of things that go along with Scorching Shot being good, a lot of requirements. And I think pack 1, pick 2, I'm not ready to sign up to pay that cost when there's a reasonable removal spell sitting right next to it. So I think I would go Explosive Derailment here.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm still looking at it. I didn't know in the moment when I was watching, hearing you say it. I don't know what I would take. I think I would take Scorching Shot, but that's, again, I think I'm just washed. I'm like, well, it's an uncommon. I gotta take the uncommon.
Stop.
I don't know. There's part of that happening in my brain, but everything you're saying is right. Like red, sorcery speed, Derailment can be a 2-for-1.
Well, and if you're maximizing Free Strider Lookout, you are drafting a multicolored green deck, and Scorching Shot makes that
real hard.
I think that's my reasoning there.
I buy it. Yoshihiko took Scorching Shot. Moving on to pick 3. The only green card in the pack is Giant Beaver. 3 and a green for the 4/4 with Vigi. Saddle for 3, and when it attacks while saddled, you put a counter on up to 1 creature that's saddled at this turn. There's Irascible Wolverine, the 3/2, 2-for-1 at common, but there's 2-for-1s everywhere. Uncommons in consideration: Ride Down, red, white, instant, destroy target blocking creature, and the creature that it was blocking gains trample until end of turn. And then there's Lively Dirge, one of my favorite cards in the format. 1 on a black spree, sorcery, +1, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle, and +2, return up to 2 creature cards with total mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah, this is a significantly less exciting pack here. I think I would just be trying to solidify myself in green with a Giant Beaver. And also the benefit of Giant Beaver being the only green card in the pack is you send a pack to your left with no green cards in it, which could work well for you in pack 2. But I'm putting next to no weight on pack 1, pick 3. Basically just received a blank pack as far as I'm concerned in my mind.
Right. Like all of these cards, these are all playable cards. For my money, maybe Lively Dirge is like the air quotes best of the bunch, but none of these cards are pulling you in a direction. So you might as well give some weight to your previous picks, like Ben is saying, and also give some weight towards, hey, I'd like to get into the best color and like to send a signal to someone for pack 2 that, hey, you're not getting green, so you better send me the green.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like it. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying I like taking Giant Beaver pick 3. I can't believe I'm saying I like taking it over Irascible Wolverine, which I was so high on previously. But I think like a week ago, I think I would have been like, oh, you go red removal spell into Wolverine. Great. Ditch this Free Strider Lookout. But like, no, I don't feel that way right now.
Okay, so if we slot a Patient Naturalist into here, pack 1, pick 3.
Oof.
What are you thinking between it and Giant Beaver?
Oh. Well, I I think I would take Naturalist. But I think that's because of what, like, if Free Strider Lookout is a different green rare, then I might say Beaver, but I think Lookout and Naturalist are kind of doing similar things, right?
I think I would take Patient Naturalist, and I think you're supposed to take Giant Beaver.
Oh no.
I don't know. I'm at a bit of I have no confidence in my evaluation of Patient Naturalist at this point in time. Like, zero confidence.
So funny. Yeah, interesting. It, is Giant Beaver good?
It's large. It's giant. It's
It
in the
is giant.
name.
It's in the name. It's in the name. All right, I'm into it. I mean, Lookout can saddle it. It's got 3 power. It's pretty good. Pack 4. The only green card again is Voracious Varmint. There's an Explosive Derailment, a Trained Erynx, and the red-black Crime Land.
Yeah, this is interesting, and this is why I like taking like, you get paid off for taking Explosive Derailment here, because then if you do that pack 1 pick 2 over Scorching Shot, because then all of a sudden the red black Crime Land starts to look really appealing versus Explosive Derailment, because it
Explosive
triggers your
Derailment
Free
number
Strider.
2.
Explosive Derailment number 2, yeah, it would trigger your Free Strider Lookout. It gives you options to splash around if you anticipate green potentially being cut. Like Jund Crimes is a good life. But I think if you take Scorching Shot, you have to take Explosive Derailment here. I don't think there's much of a question. And I think it's still close the other way. Like, in the heat of battle, I might still prioritize Explosive Derailment number 2. But I think you got to assume at the PT that Crime Lands are going to go pretty highly as well.
Yeah, but you also have to assume that removal's going pretty highly. Like,
right, I agree.
I think taking Derailment here is totally fine, even if you had taken Derailment number 1. But I appreciate what you're shouting out there. And I think also important to shout out that, again, we're not taking Voracious Varmint. And one of the things that Monty said on coverage was, like, Yoshihiko's not worried about, like, passing Voracious Varmint is effectively like passing no green cards. Like, no one's going to be like, oh, sick, Voracious Varmint pick 6. We're doing it. Green's open. So, like, I think it's okay. You don't have to take that here. But I think it would also make me a little nervous too about, like, okay, I definitely want to keep my options open, because I've seen pack with Voracious Varmint, pack with Giant Beaver, pack with Voracious Varmint. I'm not necessarily getting big green signals here.
Right.
Pick 5, maybe a signal here. So the commons that are left here, we got a Wanted Griffin, the 4-mana 3/2 flyer, dies into a mercenary. Stop Cold, the blue enchantment removal spell. Sterling Hound. I would like Sterling Hound. Does Sterling Hound get the golden egg? I just want to make sure Silver Deputy doesn't win the golden egg award. I think that card is terrible. Sterling Hound is the 3-mana 3/2 artifact, ETB's Surveil 2. There's a Tornado from the off the press, from the crime sheet. It's the 2 and a green, destroy a creature with flying, and has 1 and a green cycle. And Doc Orlock is here. Green, blue, 2/3. Makes your plot cards 2 less to plot. Signal? We signal?
No.
Is this a signal?
Is it? No.
Pick 5 Doc? Are we doing it?
No, we are not doing it. That is what the pick is here.
That's what Yoshihiko took, yeah.
Yes, that's what Yoshihiko took. I think I would maybe take Sterling Hound, maybe take a Wanted Griffin. I don't know. I guess Doc is high upside if you end up in exactly green blue. I just don't care about it that much. So maybe this is another pick where, like, you're just putting no weight on it and you're taking Doc. Yeah,
that's what
I'd
I
buy
think.
that.
Yeah, I think you take Doc and you're like, if the table wants to hand me a green blue precon, I'll take it. But otherwise, I'm not going to, like, force green blue because I got to pick 5 Doc.
Yeah. All right. I agree. Doc Orlock's the pick.
That's why I think Yoshihiko's draft is great. Like, I think the way he navigates this first pack is awesome. So pick 6, another handful of options. There's Snakeskin Veil at common. There's Prickly Pear. The 2 and a red 2/2 brings along a 1/1 mercenary. And Shoot the Sheriff at uncommon, 1 and a black, destroy a non-outlaw creature. What do you like here?
It's tough. I mean, to me, it's between Shoot the Sheriff and Prickly Pear. Like,
ooh, okay.
It feels not
thinking about Snakeskin Veil, best common in the set?
I don't. Is it? What?
No,
oh my God.
No.
I mean, it's good. Stop. Don't do that to me. I just don't think you can take Snakeskin Veil quite this highly, because, like, would you like to put a Snakeskin Veil in your green deck? Yes, but at the cost of, like, then you're kind of signing up to have to play green.
You're signing up to be green mediums potentially, where, like, you don't have to do that.
Right. So, but it is close for me between Shoot the Sheriff and Prickly Pear. And again, like if you've got Derailment, pack one, pick two. I hate to like keep hammering this, but
No,
if you've got Derailment, pack one, pick two, all of a sudden, like Shoot the Sheriff looks a lot more reasonable, and then you can
because you
be
can just
base
splash
green
those. Yeah.
plus splashing removal, and you're not committed to anything but green yet. And when you're green multicolor, you don't need green to be quite as open, I don't think,
Mm-hmm.
like for it to really work out for you. And taking Prickly Pear at this point, you're essentially signing up for red to be a base color. I think if you take Prickly Pear here.
Correct.
So it's tough. I think if I had navigated the draft my way, I think I'd be taking Shoot the Sheriff and feel better about things. But I think given where Yoshihiko's at, I think you're supposed to take Prickly Pear and probably reluctantly commit to red.
And I think I don't think we've said this on the show. I know we talked about it when I popped into your stream earlier this week. But you're higher on Shoot the Sheriff now than
Much
we
higher on
initially
Shoot
were,
the
right?
Sheriff. Yeah,
And that's because of how good the green decks are.
Right. And you just face Outlaws decks where it's dead much less often. Like you're not just playing against red black Outlaws every round, but you kind of were the first week of the format because nobody knew how much less good red black Outlaws was as an archetype.
Exactly. Pick 7, there's Tyrant Scorn, the blue-black modal spell that can kill a thing mana value 3 or less or bounce a creature. It's Tumbleweed Rising. That's the plot card that makes an XX creature, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And the rare is still in the pack. It's Pillage the Bog. Black-green sorcery has plot for 1 black-green. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is twice the number of lands you control. Then put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about any of the options here.
Mm-hmm.
I think like you could toss up between Tyrant Scorn and Tumbleweed Rising. It seems like Yoshihiko is moving away from the green crime multicolored life. So I think in a red-green deck, which it looks like where we're headed, I think Tumbleweed Rising is likely to be the best card. So I think I would be on Tumbleweed Rising here, given the picks made so far.
Tumbleweed Rising is a card that I think that's going to be my next week. Maybe I'm going to predict that I'm going to say, yeah, this card's moving up for me. I finally get it. But right now, I never want to put this card in my deck, and I don't. But it does make 4/4s against me. I don't know. It's hard for me to get behind it.
Well, sometimes it makes 7/7s too. Like it's when
that
it's
means
good.
You already had a 7/7. Like that's just like a world where you have a good card in play already.
Yes, but the thing is, when you have 1/7/7, it's hard to be. I'm serious. Why are you laughing at me? I'm trying to make a point here.
I know, just feel like you're about to be like, but 2 7/7s is better. I know that
2/7, but it's not just better. It's much better because then you would start to play offense with one. Like you can. It's like being it's like in poker having the big stack, right? Like you can bully people, and it's hard to bully people with just 1/7/7. That's like having a moderate amount of chips, but when you get 2 7/7s, you're the big stack at the table, and all of a sudden you can, start just bullying people out of hands.
It's very true. It's a good argument. I hadn't thought about that. That is what Yoshihiko landed on Tumbleweed Rising. I'm wondering about, so if you take your path here, you're open to not only, like if you took Shoot the Sheriff last pick, you're open to the black-green plot rare, right? You're open to dig in
with no good cards to search for in my deck.
Yeah, just dig for one of your worst cards. You're also open to taking Tyrant Scorn.
That's what I was saying. I think given my route, I think I would probably take Tyrant Scorn.
And then pick 8, there's no red cards, no green cards, and there is a Visage Bandit. It's pretty late for that. That's a 3 and a blue 2/2. It's plot for 2 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, you can have it be a copy of a creature you control. And like with the Doc Orlok pick 5 and then the Visage Bandit pick 8, I would start to be like, well, maybe that's going to happen. There's some blue towards the end of the pack here. A Failed Fording, the Bounce Spell, Razzle Dazzler, Harrier Strix, Djinn of Fool's Fall, another card you can plot for cheap.
But she took over Mine Raider, pick 9. I don't love that pick.
I don't either.
I think you're supposed to take Mine Raider there, pick 9.
Yeah, Mine Raider is not going to be good in red-green, though. You're just not going to get a treasure a lot of the time.
I don't know, you've already got a Prickly Pear.
That's true.
Red's got some outlaws. Like I don't think it's a 0 to make a treasure.
Yeah.
And I think when you took Prickly Pear, you kind of signed up to draft red.
But he took it when he didn't know he was going to get a Visage Bandit pick 8. I think the Bandit swings the pendulum. I don't know. We're picking between two cards I hope to never play. Like,
Yes.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. And then pack 2 starts off with a card that's familiar to Seth's draft, which is Stingerback Terror. He gets the Plot Dragon, swings the pendulum, I think, a little bit more towards red, gets an Explosive Derailment, pick 2, and then is mono green for the rest of pack 3, which is kind of incredible. He gets Spinewoods Paladin, double Raucous Entertainer, which is the 2-mana 2/2, and you can pay 1, tap it to put a counter on each creature that enter the battlefield under your control this turn, which pairs great with the card he gets, pick 7, Rise of the Varmints. Can I interest you in a bunch of 3/2 Varmints instead?
You can always interest me in Rise of the Varmints. Patient Naturalist and Rise of the Varmints have lowered my win rates so much in this format.
And so it's interesting, like he's kind of still toying with, I think, being green-blue. Like, I think he still could in his mind be green-blue, but he's probably green-red at this point, given that he's got the Terror and the Derailment. He took the Scorching Shot. He took the Prickly Pear. Like, he's green-red, and then he just kind of gets hooked up with green-red uncommons in pack 3.
Yeah, I mean, pack 1, pick 1, a Burrow Fiend. Pick 2, a Cactarantula. Pick 3, a Cactus Folk Sure Shot. Like, there's just good card after good card after good card. Into Beast Bond Outcaster, into Jolene.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you love to see it.
Yeah, and he managed to, I think he lost to Javier. Oh, also, did you watch any of these games?
I did not watch the day 2 games. No, I haven't had time.
Match 1, he chose to be on the draw game 2.
Your brain is like melting down right now.
Well, it was just so mind-blowing. Like and Marshall and Monty were also like, sort of scratching their head on it. Monty was talking through, like, you just sort of think like neither of these decks are super fast and the extra card is going to really matter, etc. So that was really interesting. Like, it was, I think, a really smart choice match 1. Then he played Javier Dominguez, just had a nutso red-black deck with Terror of the Peaks, and then he also chose to draw against Javier. I was like, I don't think you want to do that. Javier's like mono removal. He's got 2 X spells. He's got the Terror. Like, you do not want this game to go long. You want to end the game as quickly as possible. But ended up going 2-1 with this red-green beats deck and is in the top 8. So we get to cheer him on again today.
Speaking of the top 8, we would also be remiss if we didn't shout out Jason's double archive trap mill deck.
That's right. Yeah, Jason said that it was the best deck. Like, didn't say any spoilers. Like, obviously I'm not going to post the picture of the deck before the rounds are over, but teased a little, this is the best deck I've drafted in this format on Twitter. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to see this. And then, what a wild masterpiece that was. Just like ways to tutor it up. They said they got to respond to a primal command and cast archive trap for 0, right? Because they searched the library. Yeah.
Oh no! I just lost to a double archive trap deck in the finals of MTGO, like an MTGO draft, and I was so salty.
Trap and Lockpicker, which Jason also had.
Trap and Lockpicker.
Yeah.
Trap and Lockpicker. But I was so salty about it because my deck was so good and it was just such a bad matchup for me.
Just sitting there in your graveyard looking back at you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Brutal. But that was a sweet deck. And especially at the PT to get a draft that is a dream.
I know. So sick.
Style points while 3-0ing. You love to see it.
Yeah. Well, it shows. I mean, obviously, I'm sure Jason has been jamming tons of both the standard format and this limited format in the time they have, but like that shows a mastery. Like, only some number of players in that room would have been able to draft that deck in that seat. Because like it's such a greater than the sum of its parts kind of deck that you just like, you're cooking at the PT and you have to know all of but I need this piece and I need this piece and I need this piece for this all to come together. And then when it does, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. All right. Any parting thoughts before we go here?
It makes me hungry for some competitive Magic. I'm excited. We get a little baby version of it next week with the Arena Open. So I'm excited for that.
I also am very much looking forward to the Arena Open. All right, great place to wrap us up. Thank you, as always, to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
You can find all of our content on our website, lordsoflimited.com. There's links to our episode backlog. We've got our Twitch streams. We've got our YouTube channel. We've got our merch, courtesy of TeePublic, the Patreon page. We've got our tier list for Outlaws of Thunder Junction, all that good stuff available on our website.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions or a JLK What's the Play, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.